Have you ever encountered a man who seems to have simply run out of words, not from a lack of thoughts, but because he believes no one truly listens? If this resonates with you or someone you know, then what you're about to discover will offer profound clarity, far beyond typical discussions on loneliness or mental well being. The quietness itself isn't the root issue, it never was the core problem. Men of the Gen X generation didn't consciously choose to become silent, rather, they were conditioned into it from a young age. They often returned home to empty houses, learning to prepare their own meals and tackle their own challenges independently. Many endured their sorrows in solitude, not because they lacked care, but simply because there was no one present to comfort them. By the tender age of 10, they had already internalized the fundamental principle: you must resolve things yourself. By the time they reached 30, this unspoken rule had become an ingrained, almost invisible part of their very being. The psychologist Donald Winnicott termed this the capacity to be alone, the ability to comfortably exist with oneself without falling apart. Most children gradually develop this resilience with adequate support, but for Gen X men, it was forged out of sheer necessity. And here's a crucial insight rarely discussed. When your childhood teaches you to be self-sufficient, needing nothing from the outside world, adulthood feels like a validation rather than a wound. It serves as a confirmation, a proof that their early conditioning was correct. So when these men reach their 50s, after decades of hard work, providing, fixing, and enduring, they don't typically experience a breakdown. Instead, they simply grow quiet, and those around them frequently misinterpret this stillness as a sign of suffering. However, not all forms of quietness are identical. There are three distinct types of quiet men over 50, and understanding their differences is more significant than most people realize. The first category includes the man who has remained unmarried throughout his life, whether by choice or circumstance. He has meticulously constructed a solitary existence where every element is precisely as he desires, with his quietude being a deliberate and comfortable choice. Then there's the divorced man, whose quietness carries a profound weight, stemming from a life that once brimmed with shared routines, belongings, and lively sounds. After rebuilding his world, he emerged intentionally quieter, having intimately understood the true cost of unnecessary commotion and conflict. The third type, the widower, presents a silence that is perhaps the most frequently misinterpreted by others. While many perceive his quietness as grief, he experiences it as a form of continuity, a way to honor his loved one's wishes. For him, this quiet isn't an absence, but rather the enduring presence of a different kind, maintaining what she would have wanted. These three distinct men embody three unique forms of silence, none of which indicate brokenness or despair. This is precisely where a common misunderstanding arises. People often mistakenly assume that a quiet exterior reflects an equally empty or finished inner world. Yet men who have navigated profound life challenges, demanding careers, challenging marriages, or aging bodies are anything but empty. They are, in fact, meticulously refined. They have consciously eliminated the superfluous noise from their lives, discarding trivial disputes and insincere connections. This includes the futile desire to be understood by those incapable of true comprehension, leaving behind only clarity. What remains after this rigorous editing process is not an absence, but rather a clear, potent signal, a sharpened essence of their being. Consequently, these individuals possess a heightened awareness, allowing them to perceive nuances, grasp the dynamics of any situation instantly, and discern authenticity from pretense. Crucially, they harbor absolutely no interest in anything that falls into the inauthentic category. But here's what sits beneath all of that. Even a finely tuned signal, however, requires a receptive audience or purpose. And this is precisely where a quiet, insidious problem can begin to manifest itself. Researchers, while studying loneliness among Gen X men, initially anticipated finding clear signs of distress. They expected to uncover evident suffering such as profound depression, deep isolation, or despair. Instead, their findings pointed to something far less obvious and more challenging to categorize. This elusive state has been given a specific designation. They call it drift. It's crucial to understand that drift is not synonymous with traditional loneliness. True loneliness, by definition, implies a yearning for connection that remains unfulfilled. Drift presents a different scenario. It's characterized by a man ceasing to desire new experiences or ambitions. He stops being genuinely curious and loses the inclination to ponder what opportunities might lie ahead. This isn't born from sadness, but rather from a curious state of established indifference. His days become merely functional. Everything operates smoothly, yet nothing truly captivates or calls to him. AARP research reveals that 60% of Gen X adults meet clinical criteria for loneliness. However, almost none of these individuals perceive themselves as lonely because drift often registers as peace rather than pain. The true gap revealed isn't between being alone and being with someone, but between truly living and simply going through the motions. This state of drift, often mistaken for tranquility, doesn't register as pain initially, but rather a curious sense of established indifference. It persists until a morning arrives when you can't recall any recent surprise or any strong desire to pursue something with passion. This highlights the actual void, not between solitude and companionship, but between truly living and merely existing. Research on this subject is surprisingly unequivocal, suggesting that neither therapy nor group participation alone are the full answer. Instead, the most effective path lies in actions that are far more subtle and deeply personal. For instance, one man decided to revisit a language he'd abandoned in college, not to master it, but just to test his memory. Another individual began varying his daily commute, choosing a different path home simply for the sake of novelty. A third felt compelled to call his brother, not due to an emergency, but from a sudden curiosity about his sibling's aged voice. These aren't grand solutions, but rather small breaches in the routine, little disruptions that remind a man his life still holds potential for wonder. It is curiosity, not the pursuit of connection, that ultimately draws a quiet man back from the edge of apathy. It's not about someone asking, "Are you truly all right?" but rather an internal spark that prompts, "Have you ever considered?" Because even a man who has learned to require nothing can still harbor desires. He simply needs permission to acknowledge them. If you identify with these experiences, you likely understand this truth already, having felt it for years without realizing others saw it too. And if you care for such a man, a father, brother, or friend who has grown increasingly distant, don't attempt to mend his silence. Instead, gently inquire about what sparks his interest. Then truly listen to his response. Often, that simple act is precisely what's needed for him to find his way back.